Imagine a pot that never truly emptied. A pot that simmered day and night, sometimes for weeks, sometimes for months. Inside it were scraps of vegetables, bits of meat, grains, herbs, and whatever the village could spare. It was not a recipe. It was survival. In the villages of medieval Europe, this strange and ever-changing meal was known as Perpetual Stew, a humble soup that quietly kept entire communities alive. Life in medieval villages was harsh and uncertain. Harvests could fail, winters were long, food was never guaranteed. Most peasants could not afford lavish meals like roasted meats or delicate pastries enjoyed by nobles. Instead, their diet depended on simple, filling foods that could stretch as far as possible. And at the center of many homes was the hearth. Above the fire hung a heavy iron pot, the heart of the household kitchen. Inside that pot simmered something remarkable. A stew that was rarely finished and rarely replaced. The idea behind Perpetual Stew was simple. Instead of cooking separate meals every day, families kept a single pot of stew constantly simmering over the fire. Whenever someone had something edible, a carrot, cabbage leaves, barley, onions, bones, or small pieces of meat, it went into the pot. And when someone was hungry, they simply scooped out a bowl. The pot was then refilled with water and new ingredients, allowing the stew to continue indefinitely. Some historians believe certain village stews could remain cooking for months at a time. Preparation was surprisingly practical. The stew began with water, root vegetables, and grains such as barley or oats. If the family was lucky, bones from a chicken, rabbit, or pork would be added to give the broth flavor. As the stew simmered over the hearth, the ingredients slowly softened and blended together. Each day brought new additions: leftover vegetables, a handful of herbs, a scrap of salted meat. Nothing was wasted. The stew thickened over time, becoming richer and more complex with every passing day. And because the pot was kept hot over the fire, it stayed safe to eat. Perpetual Stew was more than food. It was the center of daily life. The pot fed farmers before sunrise and welcomed them back after long days in the fields. Neighbors sometimes contributed ingredients, turning the stew into a quiet act of community survival. Even monasteries kept large stew pots to feed travelers, the poor, and pilgrims. In a world without refrigerators, supermarkets, or modern food storage, this simple pot of soup was a reliable lifeline. Some medieval inns and taverns were known for keeping perpetual stews simmering for years. Travelers could stop in, pay a small coin, and receive a warm bowl of whatever the stew had become. The longer the stew simmered, the deeper its flavor grew, a medieval version of what modern chefs call layered cooking. Similar traditions existed around the world. From French pot-au-feu to Asian broth soups, many cultures developed ways to keep food simmering continuously. But in medieval villages, perpetual stew wasn't about flavor experimentation. It was about survival. Today, the idea of a stew cooking for weeks might seem strange, even unsafe. Modern kitchens rely on refrigerators, precise recipes, and fresh ingredients. But the spirit of Perpetual Stew still exists. Slow cookers, bone broths, and large family soups all echo the same idea: cooking food slowly to stretch ingredients and deepen flavor. What was once a necessity has become a culinary technique. For medieval villagers, Perpetual Stew was not a delicacy. It was not glamorous, but it was dependable. a humble pot over a fire, quietly feeding families day after day. In a time when survival depended on every scrap of food, that strange, ever-changing soup meant the difference between hunger and hope. And sometimes, the simplest meals carry the greatest stories.